Hello, and welcome to the Those Dweebs podcast, where we have a little bit of everything for everyone. Let's roll the d20 of fate and see what we are talking about today. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I hope you are all doing well. It is now officially wintertime in Michigan, and let's just say I was not prepared for the cold. Not a fan, but I digress. I would like to clear some notifications. We are up to 550 downloads, which is super awesome. Kind of curious if we can get to 600 or possibly even 700 by the end of this year. That'd be kind of amazing, to be honest. And then we are now officially on every available podcasting platform. And I cannot tell you how happy I was. I literally almost cried. I have been working so hard on getting it everywhere since I started. And I just feel like it's finally happened, and it's just a tremendous, achievement. So I want to thank everyone who has been supporting it so far, and please keep with me as I find different and exciting things to talk about on here. And of course, if you want me to cover anything, please leave me a comment, let me know. We are also switching over to our YouTube. We are 10 away from our goal of 200. So if that could happen by the end of the year too, that would be super duper awesome. They are in our links down below, so feel free to check them out and let us know. But with that being said, and the notifications being cleared, today we are going to be going into the history of quantum immortality. And I will just start by saying that I didn't know this actually had a name, and then I fell down a huge rabbit hole on it, and then kind of through doing so realized I have experienced this, and I will get to that story probably at the very end. So if you're interested in hearing my potential experience with quantum immortality, please stick with it till the very end. But yeah, let's get right into it. Quantum immortality is a speculative concept that originates from the interpretation of quantum mechanics, particularly the many worlds interpretation, MWI, and its implication on the idea of consciousness and survival. While it is not an established scientific theory, it has been a subject of philosophical debate and a popular topic in science fiction circles. Early foundation: quantum mechanics and the birth of interpretations. Quantum mechanics, the foundation of modern physics, emerged in the early 20th century, with key contributions from figures such as, I'm going to potentially butcher some of these names, so I'm sorry ahead of time, Max Planck, Albert Einstein, Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, and Erwin Schrödinger. So sorry ahead of time. These early developments showed that particles do not behave in the predictable way classical physics suggests. Instead, they exist in a state of probability and uncertainty until observed. The core principle that underpins such much of the idea of quantum immortality is the observer effect. The idea that the act of observation or measurement influences the state of a quantum system. This led to philosophical questions such about the nature of reality, consciousness, and how events unfold in the universe. One of the most famous thought experiments in quantum mechanics is Schrodinger's cat. Oh, that's what the name was, Erwin Schrödinger. Duh. Which posits that a cat in a box can be both dead and alive at the same time until observed. The development of quantum mechanics thus left open the question of how the laws of probability work when it comes to consciousness. Can the observer influence reality in ways that extend beyond simple measurement? This would become central to the later formulation of quantum immortality. The many worlds interpretation, 1950s to 1960s. In the 1950s, the many worlds interpretation, MWI, of quantum mechanics was proposed by physicist Hugh Everett III. As an alternative to the more conventional Copenhagen interpretation. The MWI suggests that when a quantum event occurs with multiple potential outcomes, all possible outcomes actually occur, but each outcome happens in a different branch of the universe. This means the universe splits into multiple parallel worlds, each containing a different version of reality. For example, if a person flips a coin, according to MWI, there are two worlds, one in which the coin lands heads up and another in which it lands tails up. This idea implies an infinite number of parallel universes, each containing a different outcome to every possible quantum event. MWI was initially met with skepticism due to its radical implications, but it eventually gained traction in the physics community due to its consistency with the principles of quantum mechanics. The interpretation also provided a way to resolve some paradoxes that arose in quantum mechanics, such as Schrödinger's cat, without invoking strange concepts like wave function collapse. The many worlds interpretation would later serve as the basis for the concept of quantum immortality. Quantum immortality concept. The thought experiment, 1980s to 1990s. The idea of quantum immortality was first proposed in the 1980s by physicist and philosopher Bostrom and others, but it became widely popular in the 1990s and as an extension of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. The concept is based on the premise that an observer's consciousness will always survive in some branch of the multiverse. In essence, quantum immortality suggests that an individual cannot truly die because in any given quantum scenario, there is always a world in which the person continues to live. For instance, if an individual faces a fatal situation, such as being hit by a car or falling from a great height, the MWI implies that there will be a branch of reality in which the person survives, no matter how improbable the survival might seem in the original universe. This suggests a form of immortality. The individual would never experience their own death because their consciousness would always transition to a parallel universe in which they survived. Key thought experiment. One of the clearest examples often cited to explain quantum immortality is the death by gunshot thought experiment. Imagine a person being shot with a gun in a quantum universe. According to MWI, there are two outcomes. In one branch of the universe, the person dies, and in another, they survive. The individual's consciousness, however, is not aware of the universe in which they died. They are only aware of the branch where they survived. In other words, the subjective experience of death is never realized because the conscious observer always finds themselves in a universe where they have not died. Philosophical and ethical consideration. As quantum immortality became more widely discussed in popular science and philosophy, it attracted several ethical and philosophical debates. Personal identity and continuity. A central question arises about whether the consciousness that survives in a new universe is truly the same consciousness. If a person transitions into a different branch of reality, it is still the same person, or is it a different version of themselves? This question touches on issues of personal identity and what constitutes as self. The simulation argument. Philosophers like Nick Bostrom, also known for the simulation hypothesis, have used quantum immortality to engage with discussions about the nature of reality. The idea that we may exist in a multiverse or simulated reality has led to the suggestion that quantum immortality could extend to simulated universes, where a consciousness is in one world might always continue, even in a virtual environment. Ethical dilemmas and risk-taking behavior. If quantum immortality were true, it might provide individuals with an incentive to take increasingly reckless risks, knowing that their consciousness would survive in a parallel universe. This raises concerns about the moral implications of engaging in dangerous behavior without fear of death. Yeah, I could see why that would be a concern. Like I said, this has been one of those very intriguing subjects to me. When I first initially came about seeing it, I remember that I was so drawn into the idea. But it just fascinates me, which is so funny because I'm like, quantum mechanics, okay, whatever. And then I heard of quantum immortality and I was instantly hooked. Granted, it's a, faction of it, but yeah. Alright. Quantum immortality in popular culture and fiction. The idea of quantum immortality has become a fascinating subject in science fiction literature, movies, and television. Writers and creators have used the concept to explore themes of parallel universes, alternate realities, and the nature of existence. Some notable references include The Man Who Folded Himself, 1973, by David Gerrold. This science fiction novel explores a character who can travel through time and alternate realities, suggesting that each new world is a possible outcome of a quantum decision. The protagonist's immortality is tied to this branching of universes. What Happened to Monday? 2017. This film, while not strictly about quantum immortality, explores the consequences of multiple versions of the same person existing in a parallel world. In parallel worlds. Woo, words are hard. Video games like The Stanley Parable, 2013, which I have heard of and watched so many gameplays of, and it's such a wild game. The game is a metafictional exploration of choices with outcomes based on infinite branches of possibilities, an echo of the many worlds theory. And it's not mentioned in this, but given the fact that I've been heavily into this series, especially this year, I want to just throw in there that I could see the Umbrella Academy kind of being a part of that whole like universe. Well, like the quantum immortality, like especially with the character Five Hargreaves, and no spoilers, but for a certain scene in season 4, you will absolutely understand. But of course, I'm not going to give spoilers for that. Go watch the series, read the comic, it's amazing. But I digress. Criticism and scientific viability. Despite its speculative allure, quantum immortality has faced criticism from both physicists and philosophers. Empirical evidence. There is no empirical evidence to suggest that the many worlds interpretation is correct or that consciousness can survive in parallel universes. Critics argue that the idea of quantum immortality is a thought experiment that lacks a solid scientific basis. Quantum decoherence and consciousness. Some physicists suggest that while quantum mechanics can explain the behavior of particles, it is not clear how it applies to macroscopic systems like the human brain. Furthermore, the nature of consciousness itself remains an unresolved question in both neuroscience and physics, making the connection between quantum mechanics and consciousness speculative at best. Ethical concerns. Even though the concept of quantum immortality might provide a comforting view of survival, it does not change the biological fact of death in the original universe. Philosophers question whether immortality in this sense is desirable, as it may still leave people trapped in a cycle of endless, meaningless existence. Quantum immortality remains a fascinating and deeply speculative concept born from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. While it has not been substantiated scientifically, it poses interesting philosophical questions about consciousness, identity, and the nature of reality. As such, it continues to be explored in popular culture, philosophy, and speculative thought, blending science, ethics, and metaphysics in a unique way. While quantum immortality remains a speculative concept rooted in quantum mechanics, there is no documented scientifically verifiable real-life experiences that support the idea of immortality through the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. However, there are instances where people discuss or allude to concepts that resemble quantum immortality through their personal experiences, either in a metaphorical sense or due to extraordinary near-death experiences, NDEs, which some might interpret as aligning with elements of the concept. And we're going to get into some examples. Near-death experiences, NDEs, and the multiverse of consciousness. Many people who have had near-death experiences describe vivid, life-altering moments in which they report out-of-body experiences, encounters with deceased loved ones, or traveling to another realm. While these experiences are often attributed to altered brain states during traumatic events, some have speculated that they might be related to parallel universes or other branches of reality, akin to the idea of quantum immortality. Dr. Eben Alexander's NDE, 2008. Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon, wrote about his profound near-death experience in his book, Proof of Heaven. He was in a coma for 7 days due to bacterial meningitis, during which he described a journey to a heavenly realm filled with indescribable beauty and otherworldly experiences. After his recovery, he claimed that his experience could not have been explained by conventional science. Some Proponents of quantum immortality or the many worlds theory have used stories like Dr. Alexander's to suggest that consciousness might present in parallel realities, or that experiences from multiple universes could overlap during near-death states. While NDEs don't offer evidence for quantum immortality, that idea that consciousness could shift between parallel worlds or continue in some other form resonates with the many worlds interpretation, that the individual might experience a sense of continuation, which some correlate with surviving in a quantum world where they never truly die. Personal accounts of surviving life-threatening events. There are also personal stories where individuals recount narrowly escaping death in ways that feel almost supernatural, with some attributing their survival to luck or divine intervention. However, in the context of quantum immortality, these individuals might interpret such survival as evidence that they transitioned to a parallel universe where they avoided death. A car accident survival. One person during a particularly violent car crash reported that they had momentarily seen their life flash before their eyes. They claimed to have felt an overwhelming sense of calm, as if they were observing themselves from an outside perspective. They survived the crash with no injuries, though it seemed inevitable that they should have been killed. Some speculative thinkers would frame this kind of experience with the context of quantum immortality, suggesting that the person's consciousness simply continued in a parallel universe where they did not die. This kind of narrative is common among those who have had near-death experiences or who have cheated death in accidents. Whether or not the event can be tied to quantum immortality is speculative, but it is a recurring theme in anecdotal accounts of impossible survival. Lucid dreaming and the multiverse of possibilities. Some people who practice lucid dreaming, where they are aware they are dreaming and can control the dream, have suggested that their experiences of alternate realities and control over their dreams can be linked to the idea of parallel universes. They might describe jumping between different versions of their life or experiencing different outcomes based on decisions they make in the dream world. While this doesn't directly equate to survival in multiple universes, these types of experiences have led some individuals to speculate that their consciousness is simply jumping from one reality to another, in a manner similar to what quantum immortality suggests. Lucid dreamer's account. One lucid dreamer describes their experience of trying to escape a nightmare by focusing their thoughts on a better reality. Each time they failed to wake up, they felt as though they were entering different worlds, with distinct versions of themselves and different potential outcomes. Some lucid dreamers interpret this phenomenon as a form of alternate realities or branching universes. While not a real-life near-death scenario, this sense of jumping between possible lives mirrors the idea that consciousness can continue in other branches of reality. Personal reflections and philosophical insights. Some individuals have embraced philosophical or speculative reflections about life, death, and existence that aligns with the speculative nature of quantum immortality. These reflections are often more conceptual or existential than direct experiences, but they provide insight into how people might interpret the idea of quantum immortality in their lives. Life after death hypothesis. Some people who are deeply interested in both science and philosophy have speculated about the nature of death, particularly in the context of quantum physics. They may claim that consciousness is not bound in a single physical body or timeline, and that in a sense we live in multiple worlds simultaneously. The idea of surviving death, or the idea that the universe splits at crucial junctures, resonates with people exploring quantum immortality, not as a literal fact, but as a possible metaphysical outcome. These individuals might experience moments of existential reflection where they feel an intuitive sense of timelessness, or that they exist simultaneously in multiple forms. The Mandela Effect and Parallel Universes. Yes, this one gets me every time. The Mandela Effect refers to the phenomenon where large groups of people remember events or details differently than how they actually occurred in the historical record. Some people suggest that this collective misremembering may be evidence of shifts between parallel universes, a concept that aligns loosely with the idea of quantum immortality. If consciousness can shift between multiple worlds, one might experience changes in reality or memory, making it seem as though alternate timelines are bleeding into one's life. Ironically, that also kind of works for Season 4 of The Umbrella Academy. Like I said, no spoilers, but you'll see if you watch it. Memory of famous events. A group of people may distinctly remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison during the 1980s, despite it not having happened in the historical timeline. Those who believe in quantum immortality might interpret this shared misremembering as a result of their consciousness having shifted between alternate realities or universes. In this view, they might think their present reality is just one branch of many, and that alternate versions of them exist in worlds where historical events unfolded differently. Now, Mandela effects are another one of those fun little subjects I tend to get into and they get very upset about because I remember it in the, I guess you could say, previous timelines or realities. Like the cornucopia at one time being on there, but then they're saying that never existed. Or the Bearstein or Bearstein bears. It's little things like that, and who knows, maybe I will do an episode getting into that. But that is a completely different topic that I will get into and then progressively get more and more ragey if I talk about it now. So let's wrap this up, and then I will get into my fun little experience when it comes to quantum immortality, or what I believe that I could have possibly experienced for it. Speculative and subjective experiences. While there are no scientifically verified instances of quantum immortality, many real-life experiences, especially those related to near-death experiences, survival against the odds, lucid dreaming, or even the Mandela effect, are often interpreted by some as resonating with the idea of parallel universes and the continuity of consciousness. These experiences are subjective and open to interpretation, and while they don't offer empirical evidence for quantum immortality, they highlight the ways in which people might understand or envision the concept in their own lives. It is important to note that these experiences and interpretations are philosophical or speculative, not scientific proof, and the idea of quantum immortality remains within the realm of thought experiments, metaphysical debates, and science fiction. Now, if you have made it this far, I will now go into my possible experience with this. It's not a story I've told many people. Like, I will bring it up occasionally, but I want to say about maybe 11 to 12 years, no, maybe it's 10 to 11 years ago. I was driving with Michelle. We were heading to Kalamazoo, and I was driving on the highway, and back then I always drove with the cruise control on, no matter where I was. Just was a comforting way for me to drive, and I could just, get to point A to point B, not really worry about that all that much. Granted, not the best idea on the highway. Don't do as I do. Just, yeah. But I feel like this all happened so fast and yet so slow all at the same time, if that even begins to make sense. But we were driving along, and I remember the cruise control was on. We were just, listening to music and, doing what we normally did on drives to Kalamazoo, when this car started passing really close to me on the left-hand side. And when I mean they were getting close, it looked like they were damn near going to sideswipe me. So without even thinking, I, was kind of moving the wheel over to the right, overcorrected, and started spinning out on the highway going to Kalamazoo. And I managed to do a 180. And the weirdest thing about this whole situation is I remember that it was almost like, I had the car coming to, passing me on my left, but I remember cars being so much closer than they actually were when that situation occurred. And I was for sure that I'm like, okay, we're going to be hit. There is a chance that we could be seriously injured. But by the time that my car was back facing the direction it was supposed to be going, I looked in the rear view mirror and cars had stopped, good, little, mile back maybe. It did not feel like it was a real situation. I remember, having such an adrenaline rush, and I couldn't stop shaking. Surprisingly didn't cry until much later, but, just experiencing that, and, I don't even remember seeing the car that had passed, after it had already gone past, but I don't think I was really necessarily looking at that point, but, yeah, so that was my, a brush with a near-death experience to possibility of quantum immortality, because I just remember, it's so funny looking back on it now, because I drove on the highway maybe a couple more times after that, and then to this day I have this very debilitating fear of driving on the highway now, but I was fine those 2 times after, and then suddenly I just wasn't. It was like I had experienced something so traumatic that I just couldn't do it anymore. But yeah, that was my experience. If you've ever experienced anything for quantum immortality or anything like that, please leave them in the comments down below. I would love to hear them. Maybe, I will jump more into this and find other people's experience to read, because, like I said, this is super fascinating to me. And yeah, like I said before, we are now officially on all streaming platforms available. So please leave us a rating, leave us a like, follow us, and I will see you guys in the next episode. All right. Bye, guys.